Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest today is the unstoppable, the unthinkable, the art mercenary himself. Now, some say the legend was born holding a pencil. Others say that the pencil led him to defeat a pack of wolves in a thunderstorm and then signed a publishing deal. Now, you see him even when you don't know him. If you've ever flipped through Sons of the Devil by Brian Busatello or found yourself lost in the pages of Redshift from Scouts Comics. If you've clutched The Covenant by Rob Liefeld or whispered, "Whoa," under your breath, or spotted his jaw-dropping sketch cards for Upper Deck's Marvel's Masterpiece or Topps Star Wars Galaxy, or even in the sewers with your favorite turtles, then yes, you've already seen the myth and the legend. Now, he was born in Brampton, and he was a creative berserker, has carved his name into the ink-soaked trenches of comic book greatness, one muscle-bound god, snarling werewolf, or demon-possessed anti-hero at a time. He's illustrated over 1,000 pages of graphic novels, and that's just what we're allowed to see. The rest, well, they're locked away. Some say it's too powerful for print. Others, national security. Now, from sketch cards to splash pages, from monster hunting gladiators to heartwarming children's books. Yeah, you heard that right. His kids' projects are said to have more heart than a Pixar short and more style than a vampire in Gucci. And now, just when you thought you've seen it all, he's teamed up to work on a series called Doge, which we're excited to dive into. But behind the ink and the glory, he has also been a force in education, teaching illustration to inspiring students, speaking across classrooms and comic cons, podcasts to pub booths, always giving back while grinding forward. So whether he's drawing Wolverine so savage you can hear him snarl, or hiking the trails to keep his creative soul fired up, our guest isn't just a comic book artist. He's a pop culture juggernaut, a one-man art army, and your favorite artist's favorite artist. So whether you're into comic books, board games, education, werewolves in tuxedos, or just good storytelling, grab your sketchbook, reading light, and a warm mug. Flex your applause muscle, cue the laser lights, unleash the howling crowd, and brace for thunder. Please join me in welcoming Mike Ruthless Ruth. Mike, thank you so much for your time and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a heck of an intro. Awesome. Thank you. Glad to be here.
No, this is fantastic. And I want to dive into your origin story here. We're going to
Sure.
dial all the way back. It's been told around campfires, sung under bridges with trolls, that you would get comics from your neighbors, and then you would go to your mom and ask you to draw some of the characters. Now, at that time, did you have a favorite character?
Yeah, I think The Thing, Ben Grimm, has always been my favorite. He remains my favorite to this day. He was also the one that my mom hated drawing for me the most. I think that's kind of where my art began, was my mom would draw for me a lot. And until my little brother was born. I was about 7 years old when he was born. And when he was born, mom didn't really have the time to spend to sit and draw with me. So she's like, "Oh, why don't you try drawing it yourself?" And I used to watch her draw stuff for me, and she could draw anything. And I think she just kind of grew up in an era where the idea of being going into art as a business wasn't something that was well supported by her family and peers at the time. But I think it's something she would have been great at had she pursued that. But for me, everything she put on paper was magical. And so, yeah, I used to steal comics off my neighbor, and usually it was the Marvel 2-in-1 comics, which was The Thing teamed up with another Marvel superhero, and yeah, The Thing was my guy. I always knew that if I was having a bad day, The Thing was probably having a worse day and handling it better than I was. So he kind of was a good guidepost for me in a lot of those ways. But in terms of drawing The Thing, it's something that remains on my bucket list to do. I've done him on small licensed products, but I've never drawn The Thing in a comic book yet, and that remains a major bucket list goal for me. But for a long time, The Thing was my white whale. I had a really difficult time capturing him. I could draw him, I could render the rocks, I could I'd make him look, tough and hardy. But the thing about drawing Ben Grimm is if it starts to get too sinister, it's no longer Ben Grimm. And so trying to capture that gentle side with the monstrous side has always been the balance that's been tricky to strike. I mean, I searched sketchbooks that are only as old as 15 years ago where I still can't draw them. I actually have a note in the sketch like 34 years old and I still can't draw the thing, stuff like that. But yeah, he's my guy for sure.
It sounds like you found your mom's kryptonite. Draw the
Oh
thing.
yeah.
She's like, oh, I hate doing this. It's a pile of rocks. What do you want from me over here?
But it's hilarious now that I'm like, I just turned 50. My mom always draws me the thing on a Christmas card or birthday card, and she still hates drawing it, but she does a good job, and it's just funny. It's just that I have this great little collection that probably out of reach now, but great little collection of drawings that she's done of the thing, in the last few years. So good stuff.
Do you remember your first sketch, the first thing that you tried to do on your own?
Oh wow. I was drawing so much as a little kid because I really wanted to be at that level. I'm trying to think of the first I do remember trying to recreate comic book covers and then not getting it quite right and erasing until I had eaten a hole through the page with my eraser and then I would cry and then my mom would console me and be like it's okay, we've got more paper, and do it again because that's one thing I always try to get across to my students or to young artists that talk to me at conventions is like, you're not going to knock it out of the park the first time. You're not going to knock it out of the park the first 1,000 times. You need to just fail. It's the best way to learn. Try and fail and try and fail, and then eventually you'll notice you fail a little bit less each time, and so finally you come to a passing grade, and then from there you can begin building on top and starting to add your own thing into what you're doing.
Now,
Yeah.
you had mentioned when you were taking the comic books off your neighbor there that it was the Marvel 2-in-1. Would you
Yeah.
say that was your earliest comic collection?
Yeah, like I think I like the Hulk as well. I like Spider-Man. The Marvel team ups again. I always love seeing Spidey teamed up with someone else. Like it was a great way to introduce kids to other characters, and a lot of those characters never really got used widely outside of those comics. But yeah, I mean, probably the Thing was my guy. And then as I got older and became more of an actual collector and not a thief, I would the Thing had his own comic book series where he was actually a pro wrestler. And as a wrestling fan, it was the best of both worlds. It was my favorite superhero, and he was also the world champ, wrestling against superpowered characters and having all kinds of adventures in space. So the Thing has always I've always kind of kept one finger, even in my most desperately poor years as an art student. I still tried to collect whatever the Thing was doing in comics whenever I could.
So the thing being a wrestler, is that where you became the master of the figure four leg lock?
Yeah, wrestling's always been something that I've loved. My dad was really into wrestling, and my brothers were. My best friend growing up was, and yeah, wrestling. I think to me, wrestling and comics have always kind of walked hand in hand. You have costumes, you have good guys, you have bad guys, you have story arcs, you have development, you have conflict, you have lots of little battles that lead to the big final battle. So to me, they've always been things that mesh very well together. But I did want to be a pro wrestler. If I didn't end up becoming an artist, I probably would have tried to go down that road. But I didn't have the physical gifts that I think you need to be a pro wrestler. I was the nerdy art kid, growing up. My brothers both played sports, and my dad was a sportsman. But growing up, I just was a terrible at any kind of ball game. I was not a when kids were going outside at recess to play at school, I would ask the teacher to stay inside so I could draw. I just wanted whatever time I could get drawing. And so my teachers always supported me in that way. So I never had my parents push me into sports. I grew up in a very sports heavy town. But I never had the pressure to join a sports team. If they saw that I was into art, they just let me do my thing. And I think that's a big reason as to why I'm doing what I'm doing now.
It's interesting that you bring up the sports family because, most heroes have a test that allows them to get their superpower, right? And they overcome something. Now, again, it's said in song. I tell you, Mike, I hear it under the bridges all the time. You actually played football for a brief stint. I believe it was a day. And unfortunately, you injured yourself. Now,
Yeah.
when you believed you unlocked that superpower for drawing, the blowing out knee, the messed up shoulder, and boom, here's the Superpower.
It's possible, yeah. Literally, my first football practice in high school, grade nine, blew out my knee, and my knee's never been the same. I think it was actually just a very a bad sprain. It was just a horrible sprain, but it never. I don't think there's anything broken, but it never really got it looked at. And then now I'm old, and now it just hurts all the time. So it's always been a plague. I did a lot of physical labor jobs growing up before I became an artist and decided to make that my life. So I think I did a lot of abuse to my bones and knees, digging trenches and doing all kinds of like shipping and receiving and heavy work. But yeah, I've always carried extra weight, so my knees are just junk. But but my right knee in particular, that fateful day. So maybe it did unlock my powers then. I had nothing to do but sit with my crutches and draw. So
That's what it is. We'll call you Mr. Glasses next. Yeah.
that's it.
Uh, when do you think that moment came for you? You're doing ship and receiving, digging ditches, being physical, doing those labor jobs. When do you think that moment for you was, wow, like this is happening? I don't have to do this anymore. My art and my creativity is taking off.
Well, I was always kind of the art kid growing up, and then in high school I started to get a little bit more recognition. They would hang my paintings at school at the St. Catherine's Collegiate where I went, and my teachers always encouraged me to go into art. And after I finished high school, I stayed an extra year to take extra art classes and kind of pad my accomplishments in high school. But I ended up just getting a job at a factory, getting a job doing this, delivering ad mail, working at a corner store or whatever it was. But I always wanted to go to Sheridan College because that seemed to be at the time were the place the closest thing to where I was to go. And so I applied 3 years in a row. I got in 3 years in a row, but I didn't have any money to go. So when I finally was able to get approved for a student loan, I made the wild move and I moved to here to Oakville by myself, and I became a student. And once you're into that high level of programming and you're with all these other art kids, it really gives you some perspective on your journey. And I think I worked really hard at school. I When I was at Sheridan, I learned an awful lot. I learned the value of a deadline. I learned how hard it can be on the body. I learned the power of coffee. I learned a lot of things, but then immediately after finishing school, I kind of chickened out and decided that there's no way I'm good enough to do this for a living, and I got another labor job, and I got a job assembling bleachers for a company here in Oakville, and we were doing a curling show. I can't remember where it was, it might have been Cambridge or something, and we were setting up the bleachers in big steel beams and setting up these bleachers, and it was very icy and it was very difficult to set up, and I was carrying one end of this 60-foot long beam with a guy on the other side, and he tripped and I tripped and fell, and as I fell, my hands were almost underneath the steel beam, and I got them out just in time, and the beam smashed on the ground and made this gigantic bong, like this bwah, this massive noise. And it was actually that moment that lit me up, and I said, you know what, I'm done with this. And I walked up to the supervisor and I said, listen, I'm really sorry. I've got to go home. And they're like, what do you mean you're going to quit? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, what's going on? I said, I just had this epiphany. I'm going to be an illustrator and I'm going to be a storyteller, or I'm going to starve to death. And that's it. And I called my girlfriend, who's now my wife. I called her. I was like, so I quit my job. And she's like, for real? I said, yeah. I said, I got to do this art thing. I said, I almost lost both my hands today. And it rang literally rang like a bell in my head. And I said, that's it. And so from that day forward, I just said, I'm doing nothing else. Here I had amassed this fairly sizable student loan. And the deal I made with myself was I'm going to pay back every penny of that loan using money earned from art.
Wow.
And from that moment forward, that's what I did. I just decided to dedicate my life to it. And there were some pretty lean years in that time, but I'm still here. I made it to 50. I've been able to stand on the shoulders of some giants in this business, and I've been able to collaborate with some really, truly brilliant writers and artists. And I've helped mentor some people coming up into the scene as well. And, I don't make a lot of money. I'll probably never own a house or anything like that, but I have, I'm in control of my own life. I live by my rules and no one else's, and for better or worse. And my wife's also a freelancer, so we're both just kind of piecing it together week by week as our bodies break down and we get older. But you know what? It's a life lived in art, and it's I think there's some value there. Well, hopefully one day more than the value in my heart. Maybe there'll be some value in my wallet and my possessions as well. But in the meantime, I'm just going to keep on steady, keep on going. It's been a long, awesome journey, and yeah. But that was my moment. It was literally almost losing both my hands and then having this massive student loan to pay back, which I paid back in 2018. The last payment was made. Every penny was paid with art, and that was the deal I made with myself. And I really can't. I really, that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have the support of my wife. She wasn't always a freelancer. There was many years where she was the one working the corporate job to kind of keep the lights on while I figured out what I was doing and made my connections. And you know, uh, people see me working on things like the Ninja Turtles or Conan, and they think that I must live this Hollywood lifestyle and take limousines everywhere. But it's really not like that. And it's I feel very privileged to be able to do what I do. But yeah, every week's a struggle. The rent is always due, and the vet bills are getting more
Mhm.
expensive, and it's yeah, we're just rolling with it.
It's neat that you talked about, in your 50s back in the day that Sheridan College was like the go-to. And, it was known to be famously tough to get into. And you
Yeah.
got in all three times.
Mhm.
Do you feel like, what do you think that superpower was like for you, where you're just like, yeah, okay, here we go, I'm submitting, knowing that, like, the cream of the crop, and you're like, hey, yeah, Mike, come on in. You're like, ah.
Yeah, it was the weirdest thing. Like, I actually had to move out of my parents' house at 18, so that I could go and get my own place and still work a full-time job and pay utility bills and show the powers that be that I could pay my bills and be an adult. And then I got approved for a student loan, and that's really the difference. What my dad, was a single income home. On paper, my dad, the banks told us my dad made too much money to send for me to qualify for a loan, which was completely ridiculous because my dad also worked at night. And it was I don't know where they figured these numbers out, but yeah, I had to go and basically prove myself to the government, I guess, to show that I was worthy of getting a student loan. And then once I got that student loan, that was it. I was going. I had to give it a try. I had to at least fail and die on my sword. If it didn't work out, well, I could always go back to my job at Value Village or wherever I was working. But I wanted to give it a try and see what I could do. And I was getting jobs right out of school, not big jobs, but they were published opportunities. And when I finished at Sheridan College after my 3 years, now it's a 4 year or 5 year accredited program. You get a whole like degree and everything. At the time, it was just interpretive illustration, 3 year applied skill. And we were taught by actual illustrators as opposed to teachers. Like we had industry pros teaching us instead of people with a teaching degree. Not that I'm disparaging one or the other, but having people that actually worked in the industry teach us the craft was, I think, an incredibly high value. And I don't know if that's still the case at Sheridan. But yeah, it was a great experience doing all that. I met some amazing people. Yeah, yeah, really good. I don't know. It's funny now when parents will come to me and ask, where should I send my kid to school? You went to Sheridan. Is Sheridan still good? I'm sure it's still good. But when I was going to school, the internet didn't exist yet. And there's so many things that were different in the business. I was still sending postcards to record companies to try to get album cover gigs and stuff like that, like stuff that would make them laugh now. And now it's all electronic. So I kind of have the best of both worlds. I was learning how to start out in a time when we didn't have all the tools that we have today. So now I tell parents, like, maybe you don't need to send your kid to art college. Maybe you can go on YouTube and have thousands of hours of free content that they can absorb and learn from. You can watch comic book greats render with markers or draw in perspective or draw the figure or design things. And it's almost going too fast now. But there was a moment there where I was always encouraging, like, maybe you don't want your kid to start out with a giant student loan debt. Maybe they want to start with just the time and put the effort in and learn from what's available for free, because there's so much out there that's just great resourceful material that they can pull from.
Well, it's great that you've said that in a lot of ways. And I mean, I think that growing up in that era, people needed that piece of paper,
Yeah,
right?
for
I
sure.
need that university or college piece of paper that says you did it, you have a debt, and now I'm going to work you to the bone to pay off the debt before you can start living your life.
Yep.
And to your point, it's like you can go on YouTube or go on the internet, go to Google and type in how to draw this, what's the best of that.
Hmm.
It's all there. So do you feel that when we let me ask you this question then. If we're going online and we're getting all of that information, sharpening our skills, at what point, if at any, do you think, hey, you know what, now's the time you need to go learn color theory or history or whatever the case may be to help influence your work?
That's a good question. I really think that like with so many artists now, especially younger artists are going towards digital art, and I make use of digital tools all the time as well. But I think it's important to keep yourself well grounded in traditional materials and also to know where we're coming from with our art history and things like that. Color theory is a thing that you can learn. It can be taught. It's also can be intuitive with some people. Um, it wasn't necessarily intuitive with me. I'm pretty basic when it comes to my color theory. But I'm married to a brilliant painter who really thinks outside the box with those colors. And I was doing a Swamp Thing drawing the other day just as a cool down sketch for the evening, and I didn't know how to finish it. And my wife just walked over. She's like, "Yeah, use that bright violet blue for your shadows, and just trust me." And I was like, "Violet blue? What are you talking about?" And I laid in these shadows with this bright violet blue, and it was just that was it. The piece was done, and it was perfect. So, I think there's so many people out there that others can learn from, getting those other perspectives. I mean, to be able to go to a convention and shake hands and spend time with people that I looked up to as a kid who are still doing it, they're still in the business. I can still learn so much from them. Ty Templeton is someone that I bring up a lot. To me, he's a Canadian legend, and he's in the Toronto area, lives near me actually. And I remember he was teaching a comic book boot camp, and I was already a 10, 15-year pro at this time. And I was like, oh, what can I possibly learn in Ty Templeton's class? And I decided to sign up for it just to, get a little bit of a refresher and get a different perspective on how to draw comics. And I realized within the first 10 minutes of being in his class, after all these years of doing this professionally, I didn't know a damn thing. Like Ty just had this huge depths of knowledge and this very different approach to things, and it really blew my head apart. And I took like 3 or 4 of his courses after that because I just it was like being reborn. It was like, wow, I thought I knew everything. I don't know anything. I don't know anything at all. And now I look at the work I did prior to his classes and I go, geez, how did anyone pay me for this? But yeah, it's just so yeah, I think I don't know. I think you always I don't know that I'm ever going to stop learning. I still go and look on YouTube and find artists and find techniques and find approaches. There's still things that I struggle to draw. I think recognizing your weak points is a key thing, and it's not an easy thing to do, but I think if every artist can look at their weaknesses or what they perceive as weaknesses and work on those things, I mean, I love drawing Conan comic books, but I hate drawing horses. Well, guess what? If you want to draw Conan comics, you better learn how to draw a horse, and you better figure it out because you might get that assignment tomorrow, and if it's all on horseback, well, then you're in for a long, long, hard deadline.
You've said, and there was something really cool that you'd said that you were drawing the Swamp Thing as a cool down. And my question for you is that is that the go-to? When you've had a stressful day, when you've had a day and you're just like, ah man, I got to get out of here. People will throw on television, go for a walk, whatever it is, and you're drawing the Swamp Thing. Is that the go-to character?
Yeah, usually he is. And the reason being is it's all organic. There's not really any hard and fast rules or anatomical or architectural or structural things to really think about too much. I find it very relaxing. And yeah, as a stress killer, it is the only medicine that I know. It's a depression killer too. I This is a lonely business sometimes, and weirdly, Swamp Thing was a character. I didn't read a lot of Swamp Thing comics growing up. I always loved monster characters, but Swamp Thing was a more adult comic book. It dealt with much higher ideals. It wasn't, punching out the bad guys. It was dealing with more. more heavy kind of worldwide events and things. When my grandfather passed away in 2016, I was very close with him, and he always was a huge encourager of my artwork, a huge supporter of me doing this for a living. And when he passed away, I really had a hard time with my grief. Really had a hard time. I didn't know how to get over it, didn't know how to grow, didn't know how to change. Just felt it all the time. And would stare at a blank page on my desk and just trying to get over these hurdles. And for whatever reason, and I don't know why, the Swamp Thing kind of came to me. He just showed up on the page. And then the next day I'd be feeling blue and I'd bring out another piece of paper and start drawing just random scribbles just to make something happen. And the Swamp Thing would emerge on the page. It felt I don't know. It felt connected somehow to my grandfather's passing. My grandfather would buy me comics when we go to Max Milk or things like that, to get cigarettes or to get the newspaper or whatever the case was. I'd always grab a comic book, and I don't have a specific tie to Swamp Thing to my grandfather, but there was something calming about that character, and my grandfather was a very calm and steady man, and I think that that's maybe there is a connection there. There's a quietness with the Swamp Thing. There's no rage. There's none of these kind of Wolverine's claws. There's none of this stuff. It's just a very calm character, and I think there was just something healing in that. And then I spent years after since then just drawing the Swamp Thing all the time, and kind of became the Swamp Thing guy. And then I got hired to draw Swamp Thing, for DC Comics, which was just so unexpected and crazy. And then that's it. Like, so the Swamp Thing still remains my medicine. Yeah, I always say he's my medicine. And sometimes when people see me draw the Swamp Thing, I'll get a message from a friend out of the blue going, "Hey, Mike, are you okay? I see you drawing the Swamp Thing. I just want to make sure you're all right," because I think people know that I associate this character as a lifeline to me. He's a life preserver in some ways, and I don't know why. It's a strange thing.
I really appreciate you sharing that with us. That's really cool. I think you're going to get a huge flood of when you start drawing the Swamp Thing on Instagram. People be like, "Hey, Mike, are you good?"
Are you okay, man? Yeah, I get a lot of that, and my hats off to my friends that know me, and they're like, "Hey, Mike's drawing the Swamp Thing a lot these days. We better check on that guy and see if he's all right." So because it can be very solitary work sometimes. It can be very, you go months sometimes without seeing your friends because you're literally chained to the drawing table. So.
Well, it's the grind and the deadlines. I mean, I would say people appreciate saying, "Hey, here's a deadline for a book or a play or whatever the case may be," but they might not necessarily understand the deadline for the illustrator. I think a lot of people's minds are copy, paste, hit print, and there you are. But that's not
Yeah,
the case. So,
yeah.
what kind of pressure does that put you under as an artist?
Well, the interesting thing about drawing comics, especially sequential art, like I do a lot of covers. I'm mainly known for drawing my covers, and I love doing covers. But with covers, you only have one problem to solve. You have to create a powerful image that sells the book. That's it. When you're drawing interior pages, every page has a litany of problems, has an abundance of problems, a cornucopia of puzzles to solve. What's the best layout? What's the best way to move the eyeball across the page?
Mm,
What's the challenging thing on this page to draw? I once had to draw a scene that took place inside of an airplane hangar, and it was a nightmare to draw all that architectural stuff and just to make it look real. And I think the challenging thing is that people who read comic books love them and they appreciate them, but on average, they're spending 1.6 seconds per frame going from frame to frame reading the comic book.
right.
So it might take me 4 days to draw that airplane hangar that the characters are interacting in, but they're only going to be appreciated for 1.6 seconds on average. So I think, but if that airplane hangar didn't look correct, the reader's taken right out of the story. If the perspective's not right, if the character doesn't look right, if the body language isn't right, or the dog doesn't look like an actual dog, or whatever the subject matter is, it removes the connectivity with the reader. And so all those things have to be tight, and all those things take time. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people who read comics and the casual fans don't really appreciate. They can just say whether they like the comic or they didn't like the comic. But I don't think, like, once in a while I'll have someone go, "Man, you really nailed that airplane hangar in that." in that scene or whatever it was. But yeah, I think that's the thing that's where the real grind comes is the research. Like you mentioned in the intro, Dodge. Dodge was a is a story about an American commando werebear battling against evil Russian mythology basically. And when I was pitched the story by the writer Matt Nixon, who's a brilliant, brilliant guy, he was basically like, "Yeah, it's about a werebear that battles werewolves in Siberia. Are you in?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in." But then when I got the script, a huge chunk of the story takes place in Vietnam on a boat. So now I had to figure out how to draw that boat and how to draw all this military equipment and make it look believable because I know the guys who read these comics, they're really all about that stuff. Like, my dad is a kind of not my dad's like a gun guy, but he's an art like a war historian type character. And so when I draw a gun, once in a while he'll be like, son, that gun wouldn't actually fire the way you have it drawn there. You haven't got the pin line like he's very so there's guys like my dad that read these comics and so I'm always aware of that the knowledge of my readers and having to meet that with respect wherever I can. Sometimes I'm way out of my depth and I've just got to wing it, but most of the time I try to be as accurate as I can for those readers.
That's really cool because it's one of those pieces where maybe some illustrators say, "Hey, you need a gun, you need a box, here you go," and you're saying, "No, no, no, I need to treat my audience smarter than what I think they might be or what they are, and create this as authentic as possible, so that when you're reading that 1 second of a page, that they're not saying, 'Hey, what's that? That picture really threw it off.'" No,
Yep.
that's really cool. And do you find that when people give you feedback, it's hey, that story was really great, or the picture was really, matched up with it. When you had said that they have that dichotomy between the two, is that kind of the push of that people love the story versus I'll refer to it as artwork, or they say, hey, the artwork matched the story, or, hey, Mike, that was okay, but the story really sold it.
Yeah, I've heard. I think sometimes. I mean, I've heard a bit of both. I always love hearing the hard feedback because I don't get that an awful lot. I have my wife looking at my stuff, and my wife is very kind. She's always like, "Yeah, that looks great. I would raise this up a little bit. I'd move this over." She gives me her design sense, which I always appreciate because she's brilliant. And yeah, getting that kind of critical feedback is super important. But I don't always get it. And sometimes when people are complimenting my work, they're like, I've heard someone say, "Yeah, I really love Dodge issue 2. I mean, the story is a little bit, but I loved your artwork." And I think, well, no, no, no. The artwork wouldn't exist without that story. I love the story of Dodge issue 2, but I appreciate you saying that. But complimenting me in a way that backhands the writer isn't isn't what I want. But again, that's just their opinion. If they're being genuine, then I accept that kind of feedback for sure. Yeah.
So let's push fast here a little bit. We've talked about your work, which I love. I actually have some of your pieces here with me, and we've it's just absolutely fantastic. I mean, you're an educator teaching the kids. You're showing the next generation on the do's, the don'ts from Mike. But you'd also mentioned that, hey, we're not living the limousines everywhere in the Hollywood style. Why is it that, some people will look at you and say, you've done the 40th anniversary of the Ninja Turtles, you've done Conan. How is it that you're not this millionaire rolling through with assistants and, you're still doing it by yourself?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's funny. Like I spent the first chunk of my career was I basically said no to. I basically never said no to any job. It didn't matter if I was painting a menu board for a hot dog stand or if I was designing, doing a portrait of someone's, pet that passed away or a memorial portrait of a family member or, gosh, I've done just about everything. I mean, an instruction manual, whatever. So I never really settled on a style because I wanted to be open to working for everybody and I just wanted consistent work. I just wanted to have steady work. I eventually got in connection with the Rubicon Publishing here in Oakville who did a lot of books for Scholastic and Harcourt and some of the bigger children's book publishers, and suddenly I found myself with a full-time job for them drawing so many books. I drew 40 graphic novels in like a 4 or 5 year span, and they were all 44 pages, penciled, inked, and colored by me. And it was a lot of it was historical material or stuff for new Canadians or people with English as a second language to help them understand history or Canadian history or just the boring parts of our culture, but done with pictures and words that help make it more palatable, more understandable. So I had a huge career just doing that stuff before I actually got into doing comics. And when that job was over, I said, you know what? I got to go after it. I was told in Sheridan that I'd never make it as a comic book artist. I was never good enough. I didn't have a style. I didn't have something that people would demand, from me particularly. And I was going to school at the time with guys who were really definitely heading towards comics and had that style on lock. I just wanted to draw things, and so I decided it's okay that I don't have a style. I'm just going to work for everybody and anybody. And for the first like 15 years of my career, I never said no to a job, no matter what it paid or no matter what it was for, because I wanted to create a body of work. I wanted to see if I could find a style in all of these different experiences and come to a place where people would just go, I want Mike to do this for me because he can do this. But I was doing cute stuff for like the Easter Seals Foundation. I was doing a lot of charity work and a lot of graphics for, fundraisers and like the CNIB or, Canadian Lung Association. I once painted a Santa Claus for the Canadian Lung Association that goes out in their donor mailer, appeals, and they used it for 7 years. So it would show up in every mailbox across Canada for 7 years. You probably got one in your mailbox at one point. I didn't really, I probably rambled through the point of the question you asked me, but I've done a lot of things.
It brought up other questions for me. I was reading in another article that someone had said to you at Sheridan, I believe that your portfolio was useless, that this was never going to work for you.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of one of those things of that if you could take that portfolio back to that person, be like, okay, maybe this specific piece you didn't enjoy, but look where I am now.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of those teachers, they were very kind in their feedback, but they were like, yeah, don't go after comics. You're good at portraits. You should work in editorial portraits, work for newspapers, the Atlantic Monthly, whatever, get into magazines and that kind of stuff. And the reason was, at the end of the school, the third year program, when we all have our 8x4 panel on the wall, we all were hanging our artwork. My panel had like 15 pieces on it, and each piece looked like it was drawn by a different person. Whereas a lot of artists had a very distinctive style in every piece. They carried that through their entire body of work. And so I felt really kind of like, damn, like I went through this school 3 years and I've come out and I'm kind of empty-handed because my portfolio was kind of useless. But it wasn't. What it was a portfolio that showed a lot of competence in doing all different kinds of things in the illustration world. And so as a result, I got jobs doing all different kinds of things in the illustration world. And I can name probably 5 or 6 people that I went to school with that actually stuck with illustration. And I graduated, I think we started with 300 students and we finished with about 70. And out of those 70, I think I can name 5 people that are still involved in the arts in some way. I think a lot of people try to do the freelance thing after school and they couldn't live with the stress of not having their rent lined up for the next few months or not having a steady paycheck. I kind of thrive in that uncertainty, and I still do. I'm 50. I still don't know where August rent is coming from. I don't legit know where it's coming from, but I'll have it because I've had it every month all these years. So
It seems like what they were teaching you at school was, or what they were pushing towards was if you found your style, then it became commercial, right? And then it became this thing of that, hey, this newspaper is always looking for that,
yeah.
and that's what we're going to teach you on how to do. Whereas we don't know comic books, we don't know that world. So to give you advice and to teach you on it, we could be completely wrong. But wait a minute, the Toronto Star takes pictures like this, so draw it like this.
Yeah. I think in a way I let because I was paying those teachers the big bucks to be educated by them. I think I took everything they said to heart, and it was a good thing because I think if I had gone after a comic book career in 1999, I would have likely starved to death. I think I said yes to every job, no matter what it was, and I did all kinds of things. I mean, I should really sit down and make a list of all the different clients and things I've worked for because some of them are so far outside of what I do now, but I have the experience of doing them, and I could do it again if I had to. Um, Yeah, I'm really kind of glad that I did listen to them. As angry as I was, I think I was glad that I listened to them because looking back, I've been able to finally chase after the things I want to do. But I was able to, in all of my years of staying to it and just being a dedicated illustrator, I was able to develop a skill set to match that.
Hmm.
You know, I think luck plays a big part in this business. I think luck plays a big part in everyone's business, but I think luck only works if you've done the work. Luck only matters if you've actually done the work, because when that lucky phone call comes in, you've got to be ready.
Yeah.
And if you've been sitting here waiting for that phone call, twiddling your thumbs, waiting for that phone call, and then it comes, you don't have the skills for it. But if you work while you're waiting for that phone call, because that phone call may never come, but if you're working while you're in pursuit of that dream, I think when that lucky day comes and you're ready for it, then that can open up all kinds of doors. I mean, I just finished my first interior story for Conan, a Savage Sword of Conan. It was handed in on the 1st of July, and it was a huge thing for me because I've drawn comics before. I've drawn lots of graphic novels before, but never with a household name, never with a well-known character. I've done lots of covers and stuff. But that's the funny thing about working in comics. You spend the first 10 years I was working in comics, I worked on a lot of independent things and small publisher things that no one had heard of. So they go, "Oh, you're a comic book artist. What do you draw?" And then I name some comic they've never heard of. But now when I can say, "Well, I just did this thing for the Ninja Turtles," and everyone's like, "Whoa, Ninja Turtles," because Ninja Turtles is, on their kid's lunchbox, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's a different thing. So yeah. Again, I'm not sure if I answered the question. I
No,
kind of
no,
went
no,
off
of
on a
course.
thing.
And while I have you here, something that's popped up into my mind is that, you know, what's a stereotype about comic artists that you hate or that you would want to address?
That's a really good question. There are a lot of stereotypes, for sure. Wow, that's a really good question. I hadn't thought of that before. I don't know. Maybe people think that comic book artists are like a one-trick pony, that's the only thing that they can do. Or maybe they're not grounded in reality. Or the one criticism that I really dislike is that people don't think it's a real job.
Hmm.
you know, I don't make a great living wage. Sometimes I do. Project to project, sure, I can make pretty decent income on particular project one to the next, but there's a lot of stuff I've done for free. I spent years working for free just to get out there, just to get published. Not that I'm suggesting anyone do that, but it was a way to get some recognition and to get published in comics, which would show comic book companies like, "Hey, I can do this." And they go, "Yes, you can." Like anytime I was asked to do a pinup for someone's indie comic book, I would always draw it as if it was the cover of the book, because you never know. And in one case, they were like, "Oh, thanks for the pinup. Do you mind if we use it as a variant cover?" Well, that's actually what I was going for. So yeah, I don't mind at all. Um, so I mean, I've done all kinds of heavy labor jobs, and I mean, even between 2010 and 2018, I was the superintendent of this derelict building that I live in. And it was a nightmare of a job. We have terrible plumbing and hydro and everything in this place. Place is falling down. And it was a tough job, but I had to keep the lights on while I was making my comics. And that's literally what it was. So I think there's a broader skill set than people think. I think a lot of people go, "Oh, well, that's fun. You get to draw comics all day. Like I have to go and do this, and I have to go and make deliveries, or I have to work a forklift all day." And I mean, I've done some of those things too. So I have an appreciation for where everyone's coming from. But I would say that of all the different jobs that I've done, drawing comics is probably the most difficult one. It demands the most of my body. It demands the most of my time, and it ruins birthdays. It ruins family events. It ruins Christmas. I even had to take work with me on my honeymoon. Which a note to everyone watching this: you must never take work on your honeymoon if you can avoid it. Please don't. Learn from my mistake, because that is a thing that will never go away. Believe me. But yeah, I think, yeah. I don't know if I answered that, but
No, no, you did it, and it brought me up to a question for you: is what's the worst advice that you've ever been given in your career so far?
oh, um, someone once told me that if I was going to make it in this business, I would have to change my style.
Hmm.
And I said, "I don't have a style." I said, I don't. I can work for, I can do cute, cuddly animals for your storybook tomorrow, and I can draw the most hideous, violent, gory horror artwork to, the next day. I have a broad range of skills, and when it comes to drawing. And I had a very popular and very prominent DC and Marvel artist told me that, Mike, you're just not gonna make it because you don't have that house style. You don't have that thing. You're gonna have to just kind of modernize your look. You're living in the past. You're drawing like these guys from the 70s, and you've got to draw like someone who's in the now. And I appreciated where he was coming from. Um, but I immediately dismissed that because it just wasn't me. I have to approach it how I'm going to approach it, and I don't know what that is until I'm doing it. So, yeah, you do get bad advice sometimes though in this business, but that's
It-
one that sticks out for me.
And Mike, out of all the conventions that you've gone to, the speaking engagements, everything with your students that you've done, what is something that you wished someone asked you but they never did?
Ah, that's
You
a
know, that one question where you're like, yeah, hey, my name is Mike. Yeah, I did this. Yeah, I did that. But what's that one question where you're like, you know what? No one's ever asked me that.
hmm. That's really good. That is a really, really good question. I get asked a lot of wild things sometimes. Huh. I don't know that anyone's ever asked me about the importance of um, experiencing poverty and living very low in your means. I've been with my wife for 26 years, and someone asked her the other day, like, how have you guys been able to do it for 26 years? And her answer was like, have you ever tried being poor with somebody?
Huh.
And and I heard her say it, and I kind of thought, geez. And a moment I had to stop and think, and I went, no, you know what? She's right, because we've had some pretty tough times, and I think the ability to make art during those tough times is a real test of the character and a test of your willingness and your want to do this. Um, that is a really good question, Chris. I don't know that I'm not sure I know I because I get a lot of the standard, like, how did you get started and what's your favorite job and what's the best thing you've ever worked on. And I think yeah, I think if anyone asked, the importance of having support. I think a lot of artists survive despite having everything against them. No family support, no friend support. I've had all of that. I've had everyone always say, "Yeah, you should be doing this," and I think that's kind of a thing that's kept me going, because now it's almost like I had to prove it to them to keep on going and doing that. So I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before, but that is a key thing. Like my wife's support, my parents' support, my grandparents, rest in peace, their support was a thing that was like a real, like, it was a beacon. It kept me going. It kept me on target. They thought that I could do it, so I wanted to make sure that they were right. And yeah, yeah, that's a good question though. I have to think about that one again.
And Mike, where can people learn more about you?
Well, I post a lot on Instagram. On my Instagram handle is Uncouth Ruth, and at Uncouth Ruth. And I go live sometimes, and I'll chat. Or I'll just draw. I post a lot of live stream stuff. I post a lot of time lapse videos of process. I try to, while I'm not actively teaching anymore, I do take every opportunity to do panels or things like that at conventions when I'm invited to them. So people can find me at the Toronto Comic Con at the end, or the Toronto Fan Expo, and at the end of August. I think it's like the 22nd to 25th or something this year. I'll be in the Ottawa Comic Con in September, early September. Um, but they can find me at the local comic shop sometimes at Dungeon Comics here in Oakville. But yeah, you can find me online. I'm on Facebook quite a bit too. My Facebook and my Instagram are linked. I'm not on Twitter or X anymore, but yeah, I'm on there quite a bit, and I'm always available for, to give advice or to look at someone's work or to check out a script. I mean, I'm no genius or expert, but I've been doing it long enough that I could tell you what I wouldn't do if I was looking at your stuff. But yeah, you can find me there usually. I'm pretty easy to find.
And Mike, when you wake up in the morning, what's one of the cups of coffee that you're allowed to have?
I've been really into the Balzac's coffee lately. I've been enjoying that. The organic blend. We grabbed some cheap. It was on sale, and I'm liking that one. I also drink a fair amount of cold brew in the summertime.
Mm.
But yeah, once or one or two coffees a day. I had to limit it though. I've got a blood pressure thing, so I got to limit my caffeine. But yeah, one or two a day, and then at night, if I have to keep on working all night, I have some really horrible decaf coffee, which as a placebo works. It convinces my brain that I'm drinking coffee, and there is some power in the placebo for sure. So
And Mike, I have time for one last question for you here on Coffee with Chris, and it's been absolutely amazing here. Is what makes Mike smile?
makes Mike smile. Oh man. My cats make me smile. They're older boys. They're going to be 16, and seeing them, they've been here for the hardest part of my journey, and when growing old with them and helping them through their day is something that makes me smile. Seeing kids that draw and want to draw and haven't submitted to the AI monster yet, the ones that just want to pick up their crayons and draw, that makes me smile. Or when a kid will bring me an original character that they've drawn as a gift, or as a like, hey, check out this thing that I drew. Would you draw your version of this thing for me? That's a huge thing. My wife's work makes me smile. My wife's a jeweler. She makes silver jewelry. She also a painter and an artist, but her work always makes me smile because I know the work that goes into it, and I have a huge appreciation for that. Yeah, the lake makes me smile. Getting in the water. I was never a water kid growing up, but now as an adult, I love to just float around the lake like a sea monster now. And I'm not a good swimmer, but I like to get in the cold water and just and float around with a big wide brim hat on, like some monster in the lake. And those rare days I get off, that's what I like to do in the summertime. So
No, that's
yeah.
really cool. As I said, that was the last question I had for you today on Coffee with Chris. Everyone out there, Mike Rooth, get to Google, get to Facebook, gets to Instagram, get to Fan Expo at the end of August. Get out and meet this guy. You're going to absolutely love him. Remember to smile to inspire everyone and have a fantastic day. Again, Mike, thank you so much for your time today.
Real pleasure, man. Thank you, Chris.